Basic principle in any legal matter is that you must hear the other side for purpose of justice, balance, equity, and the principle is called audi alteram partem. You must hear the other side. So it is to be expected that INEC, having been joined as a respondent in the petition by the Labour Party and Mr. Peter Obi, would file its own response. And it's not only INEC that has filed a response. The APC and Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the presidential candidate of that party, declared president-elect, also filed a response to that petition. But the one, that you introduce is the response of INEC. And INEC, through Mahmood SAN, its counsel, in responding, has said that, look, the prayers, the reliefs sought by the Labour Party should not be granted by the court, to the extent that they are, in the view of INEC, nebulous, anachronistic, academic, vague, ungrantable, unsustainable, very robust, very, long delivery of adjectives there coming from Mahmood SAN in the response. And what are these, grounds of petition by the Labour Party and Mr. Peter Obi? One, that Bola Ahmed Tinubu was not validly elected, and did not have the majority number of votes cast in that election conducted on February 25. Two, that Shetima, his, running mate, had a double nomination, one for the senatorial seat and then the other one for the presidential race, which would seem to be a violation, or which is, a violation of the Electoral Act. Three, that the election was marred by rigging and manipulations. Four, that INEC did not follow its own regulations and guidelines, and that INEC ended up, in fact, violating its own enabling laws and even the Constitution. And to that extent, Labour Party and Mr. Peter Obi had argued in their petition that the election was not properly conducted. What was the relief sought? The relief sought was that Mr. Peter Obi and the Labour Party should be declared winner of that particular election. So INEC now says, look, Labour Party has no case to present, and that's one of the reasons that Mahmood SAN was pointing out, is that Labour Party did not even have enough polling agents, that there was a shortfall in terms of the polling agents provided in all the 176,846 polling units, that Labour Party didn't live up to expectation by over 41 polling agents, and therefore that the Labour Party cannot complain about representation. And that in any case, Mr. Peter Obi cannot claim to have won that election because INEC points out in its response, he doesn't have, 1/4 of the votes in 2/3 of the states, and he did not even get the majority of the votes. So, but it's for the, tribunal to look at this response against the, petition and the relief sought by the petitioners, in this case, Labour Party and Mr. Peter Obi. And I refer to the response by the APC. The APC has also responded. And the APC, in their own response, just saying basically that, in fact, Mr. Peter Obi was not even a candidate in that election. And therefore, he has no grounds to even raise a protest. And their point is that it's with reference to Section 77 of the Electoral Act, 77(1)(2)(3), and that Mr. Peter Obi, as of the time he joined the Labour Party on May 27 and became the candidate of that party on May 30, he was already, he was still a member of the People's Democratic Party, and that you cannot be in two places at the same time. That would be a violation of Section 77(3) of the Electoral Act, which requires political parties to submit membership register to INEC 30 days before their primaries and conventions. So a technical point there, but again, it's for the tribunal to look at that. APC also argues further that Mr. Peter Obi and the Labour Party had complained about a certain $460,000 that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu paid in a case of dishonesty in the U.S. District Court. Of course, they dismissed that again. That's fiction. But that's another issue that we argued. Was the candidate within the purview of Section 131, qualified to have been in that election? They will raise all kinds of points about time. They will raise all kinds of points about whether, in fact, an indictment amounts to a conviction. And by time I'm talking about the 10-year rule, which they also have in certain jurisdictions in the U.S. Finally, the APC, responding to Mr. Peter Obi and Labour Party, says that the PDP was not joined. The PDP and Atiku were not joined in the petition by the Labour Party, and that these are two major parties that could be affected by the outcome. So, two sides of the story. It's now for Labour, for the tribunal to go into the matter, and if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. But what we will just appeal to all the parties involved is that all of them should be committed to the rule of law, and that the febrile rhetoric that has overtaken the airwaves and the public space, should be toned down, and the leadership of the various political parties should also call their people to order. Because we've seen a lot of, surprising things, shocking things, let me say. Maybe not surprising. Nigerians no longer surprise anybody. They're capable of anything. Because even this morning, Mr. Peter Obi, through Dirone Fade, has asked us to issue a statement that when he traveled to London during Easter on Good Friday, that he was more or less detained at the airport because somebody had been using his identity. Okay, and the statement by Dirone Fade pointed out that this is part of the harassment, intimidation that, Mr. Peter Obi has been subjected to, including impersonation in the United Kingdom, in a country where he had lived. So people should not go to extreme situations. And that brings me immediately to Chimamanda, who had intervened when she wrote Nigeria, a Hollow Democracy, a letter to President Joe Biden. She has been called all kinds of names. She has been abused. People have said, she's not. People who cannot even write a paragraph successfully to describe their own identity. I say, she's not a writer. She plagiarized, half of a Yellow Sun. Complete ignorant people who, just because they have the opportunity to be in the public space and access to media platforms, just talk absolute rubbish. So I think what she has done, as a follow-up to that Nigeria, a Hollow Democracy letter that caused so much, reaction, if you like, violent reaction, is to just point out, that, look, she's not supporting Peter Obi because she's Igbo. She's supporting him because he thinks that he's a good candidate and because of his commitment to education. 2, by speaking up a second time, it means nobody can intimidate her. You can't silence her. People say, she lives abroad. She didn't vote. Look, I don't understand that kind of reasoning. You don't have to live in Nigeria to be able to comment on Nigeria. The Nigerian Constitution even recognizes dual nationality. You can be in any part of the world and show interest in your own country. In fact, people like Chimamanda, who are great ambassadors of the country on the literary stage, this is a lady who has been given 14 different honorary degrees, by major universities across the world, who has represented Nigeria. Nobody complained the other time when she was defending Nigeria interests. Now, because she says, people have lost the opportunity to be heroes, then people are, up in arms against her. Then we encourage a culture of tolerance, of debate, of openness, which seems to become very difficult, almost impossible for, an imagined babulous, voluble, hypertensive, verbal diarrhea community that will seem to have overtaken the space in terms of debating and discussing and analyzing the outcome of the 2023 electoral process. So Chimamanda Adichie, standing up for herself, I think she has my support, as I pointed out yesterday in a lengthy piece. And then, of course, she disagrees with Professor Wole Soyinka and says, well, she doesn't think Dati Ahmed, but Dati Ahmed, is guilty of fascism. She thinks it's INEC that is guilty of fascism. Fine. We're in the public's place. Let different opinions flourish. But for some people to think that their own view of the coin is the only correct view, it's a culture of intolerance that we need to address in this country.
Absolutely. Very well said, Dr. Abati. I just had a few things because you've dissected this story so well. Just to mention, I married the two stories together in terms of INEC's response and the interview, and I would recommend that interview if you haven't seen it to watch it. The interview on our primetime show yesterday evening with Chimamanda Odeluwa Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, where she highlighted some key issues. But let me start with how she describes the elections as unforgivably flawed. This she said in her letter, but she also emphasized that she wasn't moving away from that particular assertion. She then said that the INEC chairman, Professor Yakubu, and the president missed a prime opportunity to be heroes of democracy, not just in Nigeria, but Africa. And I thought that was so profound. Because as we have seen, Nigeria, as the giant of Africa, the big brother of Africa, is being watched by many democracies around Africa. And unfortunately, what's played out, in her opinion, in her view, didn't quite speak well of what should be the giant of Africa. Now, going back to Professor Yakubu and INEC's stance in terms of what they said, what they didn't say, what they promised, what they didn't promise, I believe that, as was said, as was opined yesterday by Ms. Adichie, INEC missed the opportunity to give Nigerians the best elections in modern democracy, especially with the things that were working for them and what they had on side. Number one, the Electoral Act of 2022 was supposed to aid INEC in producing the finest election we've seen in modern democracy. They had a huge budget that was approved by the federal government and released. At least we haven't heard of the fact that they didn't get the money. In fact, the president assured Nigerians that all resources, including financial resources required by INEC, was made available to the tune of over 300 billion naira. People have questioned, where did that money go? If you have such a huge budget, then the kind of election that should come up from that should be exceptional. Unfortunately, many Nigerians cannot say, both the opposition party and the ruling party cannot describe that election as exceptional. Also, we look at technology. BVAS was supposed to be the game changer. Coming out now to talk about how they made promises, or perhaps the statement made by INEC chairman was taken out of context. He didn't promise it was going to be uploaded to IREV. IREV is not a collation center, and so on. These are statements after the fact. What Nigerians heard again and again before elections was that they were going to have an opportunity to produce a transparent election, and IREV was going to ensure that, because you could view results as they were announced real-time as from collation centers, they were going to be transmitted to IREV. Unfortunately, they broke their promise to Nigerians. Beyond the fact that they say that they perhaps were not legally bound because they could, at their own discretion, determine how they would transmit results, the promise made to Nigeria, and now it brings to question the matter of integrity. What we saw INEC do during the election was release statements and counter statements in terms of what they were going to do, and then correcting or perhaps trying to explain themselves. But what that left for us as Nigerians was a thought that perhaps someone wasn't being very honest or factual with Nigerians. Hence, you can understand the agitations, the disappointments from Nigerians post the elections. She made a number of statements, now going back to Mr. Adichie's statements yesterday, around the fact that when we talk about fascism, INEC themselves should be the ones who should be seen as fascists, as they, in the conduct of the way PVCs were handled, disenfranchised Nigerians. It could be seen as disenfranchisement. It could be seen as taking the voices of Nigerians and not allowing many Nigerians to exercise their franchise. She also talked about and put to rest the fact that when you say that, oh, you shouldn't come and you didn't vote, People wanted to vote. She gave a personal example. A number of people who went out against all odds to register didn't get their PVCs. It was a big challenge trying to register in the first place. In getting the PVCs was another hurdle to cross. A number of people didn't succeed. Therefore, castigating people when they tried is quite unfortunate. And also the fact that every Nigerian citizen, home and abroad, has the right to comment on events happening. We talk about the diasporan contributions to Nigeria. So if we can take their contributions in terms of the monetary contributions, we must be ready to take their involvement in politics as well. A detailed interview. She had the opportunity to explain perhaps further her point. I'll end on this note. She mentioned in terms of the background, and I think that's quite important so that we understand the full import of that letter. It was to challenge the United States hypocrisy in the way that they push for democracy in Africa, yet are quick to support what seems like an undemocratic process. Therefore, if the United States, on one hand, can say that, oh, you know, this democracy is X, Y, Z, then they should also, or they are quick to criticize Africa's democracy, they must also be seen to uphold their stance all through. It sparks of hypocrisy if you talk about the fact that we are not as democratic as democracy should look like, and then be quick to celebrate what Nigerians themselves have largely said was an undemocratic process. A fine interview, and like Dr. Abati said, at the end of the day, the judiciary is where all eyes are on currently. They would be the ones to settle the matter. They would be the ones to decide. But what Nigerians are asking is that this is the final hope for many Nigerians. We are hoping that the judiciary would be fair, would be transparent, and would uphold the rule of law.